it's just got a lot of doors and secret codes before you can get through to it. Thank you all so much for sharing your Sunday with us, for trusting us, actually, with the whole chunk of your day. I've been lucky enough to work with innovation for a very long time. It's actually been my job, whether it was at Walt Disney Imagineering or now at the Entertainment Technology Center. And we sort of did it because it was our job. It really never occurred to us to look back and kind of quantify what it was we did, how or why. For me, innovation has always been pretty exciting. It's thrilling, almost like the anticipation of what is the challenge and then the rush down that roller coaster hill of what you've developed. So I like this picture because it's fearless. Innovation is fearless. And it has to be fearless because it is very inherently a scary sort of thing to do. Several years ago, quite by accident, I got tasked with the challenge of looking back and trying to quantify what innovation was. I worked at a company that had a change in leadership. And the change in leadership went from a model of very specific sort of silos as to how you worked, who did what and how, to innovation is everywhere. Every single person in the company is now responsible for having good ideas. And this was actually fairly terrifying. What the heck was innovation? Suddenly now it's my job. There were groups tasked with it specifically and other groups who were specifically not tasked with it, and now we all had to do it. So if you try and define it, IBM told us we had to think. Apple told us that we had to think different. And then 1969 or so, the phrase think outside the box came into play. But what was this box and what was on the other side of it really wasn't very clear. Nike said, just shut up and do it, whatever it was we're doing. It didn't actually tell us what we had to do, though. It told us, do it, but how? Nobody was giving lessons on what innovation was or what the best practices were to incent it either in yourself or specifically if you were in charge of a team who was suddenly tasked with doing this. One of the first bits of kickback we got at the company was people saying, what do you mean innovate? I'm not creative. I'm not the idea guy. In fact, you specifically hired me because I'm typey. I don't have ideas. So we had to think about solving this. This was not an option for us to not solve it. So there was a challenge to try and train your teams to be more innovative. One group did an interesting exercise. 125 employees, all male, all left brain, programmers primarily. This is a game. Has anyone played this? It's called Friday Night at the ER. It's a game that's supposed to teach teams how to collaborate and innovate. Very specifically, groups are pulled together, and this is sold by HR companies to train your companies to be better. The game is set up that there's a rush of things coming into the emergency room on a Friday night, and those little marbles are patients and beds and things, and you're moving them around the table. How the game is set up is that you fail. At the end of the day, they say, that's not how you should have done it, and then you have a room full of 125 enraged engineers because you set them up for failure. You didn't give them the tools to succeed. You played games with them, and they failed, and then you said, no, perhaps you should have done this or that. So this was 25 people over 6 days. So they tried this on Monday. I got a call Monday night that said, whoa, Nellie, this is not working. They're really mad at us. So I went in on Tuesday, and I was supposed to blend with the team, like they wouldn't notice I wasn't part of the team. And figure out what was going on, what was failing, and trying to develop a secondary program. Now they're advertising, well, this is just phase 1. There's going to be phase 2 where we teach you. And I saw a lot of really interesting things. One of the first things that came out, people who did have some interesting ideas, was that, they were cheating. That team cheated when they moved some of their beds from the pediatric ward to the seniors. That was, who said you could move beds? And one team, actually, interesting enough, had convinced themselves they were going to move the beds, but they physically rolled the marbles down the board. Like instead of just picking up and moving it, in their head, psychologically, if they went through the process of rolling it down the hallway, that was somehow not cheating. So if you actually think about, okay, well, what is cheating? Cheating, I'm going to read to you now here. To deceive by trickery or to swindle, to violate the rules deliberately, as in a game. The biggest problem here was what the heck were the rules? Nobody had explained what is innovation, what were the rules of the game. When they put the board on the table with the little marbles, they didn't explain anything. They just said go. And a group of left-brained programmers, very specifically, they like rules and numbers and order and such, they sort of developed a rule set in their head that nobody had actually set down as the actual rules. Everyone take a look at this here. What one line will make that equal to 8? Everyone got that in their head? Is that what was in your head? So this next one here, what one line will make that equal to 6? Everyone got that in your head? How many people feel lied to? They're like, oh, what the? That's not a line. You feel lied to? So the first response is that you have somehow been tricked or deceived. And what is that technique? People are looking up their geometry books. Does that qualify as a line? I never said the word Roman numerals. Often folks will put this sort of artificial construct of what the rules were in their head and presume I'm looking for a Roman numeral as an answer. And you feel heartbroken that you've been lied to. So I think it's very important to sort of step back and ask yourself, wait, what are the rules? And maybe are there no rules? And is that actually an option? One of the reasons that you feel lied to and that you feel sort of tricked and deceived, Mr. Fields talked about this a bit, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How many of you learned this in high school? It's a classic. You'll notice there that I have a disclaimer. It's not actually accepted as a... Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about the levels that you need to go through before you feel creative. At the tippy top here, that's where you're brave enough to move your hospital beds down the board. That's where you might see the S and go, sure, it's an S, whatever. Or if I tell you if it's an S, you go, okay, whatever. You're not angry or mean because you are comfortable. You need to go through these levels before you can reach an area where you feel comfortable being super creative, innovative. Mr. Fields talked about these. I need to feel as if I belong to the group. I need to have no fear of judgment. I need to have enough self-esteem. It is a long road from the bottom there to the top there. So innovation is very specifically risk. Risk is very, very scary. There's lots of exceptionally worthy reasons to be terrified of risk. They always have an element of the known, unknown. I don't know what that is. It's a little scary. I don't know what that is. It's very scary. And it's not an accident that that's scary. We evolved to a point to have sort of a wall around us to make sort of question, what is that might kill me? But it might not. So it's not to say that innovation is easy. Innovation is hard. Risky is very hard. You have to get past some very well-founded understandings of what is risky, what is not risky, what is the fear. I love the fact that Mr. Fields and I use the exact same word here, paralyzing. The #1 fear for human beings, public speaking. Why are we scared of public speaking? We're fear of being judged by others. We're fear of somebody pointing the finger at us and saying there's something bad with that idea, or there's something wrong, or you're just a brown noser by popping up with all these great ideas, not you think you're a little goody two-shoes. And this happens at all levels. Senior executives, interns, people at all levels are paralyzed by this fear of being judged by others. Because, back to Maslow there, you need to be accepted by the tribe. Rejection is horrible. What's a common term if somebody has been rejected, if their boyfriend or girlfriend dumped them or they didn't get a job that they thought they were going to get? They'll say, I felt like I was kicked in the stomach. And that's not an accident. There's a physiological response to rejection, which you feel it in your gut. And that is on purpose. I'm presuming we all subscribe to Darwinism. Back in the day, when you were rejected by the tribe, that was a problem. You would die. If you weren't part of the collective, you would die. You could not last as an individual. So you needed to develop a response where rejection was bad. You need to work in a universe where you avoided rejection at all costs. And this still controls us to this day. I just love this, Maslow. There it is again. I need to get through my fear. So if the single biggest thing thwarting innovation, thwarting me putting those risky ideas out there, is fear of judgment by others, what's the single biggest thing we can do to incent innovation? How about just shutting up? If you simply do not judge, simply do not roll your eyes and go, oh yeah, whatever, we have statistically a much higher chance of succeeding innovation-wise. That's so easy. Everyone can just shut up, right? What do you think the possibilities are if you would actually support innovation? In the event that you just expected the people you work with to do better, regardless of age, gender, discipline, wherever you come from, if the bar is set higher, if the expectations are set higher, all humans tend to meet that need. And I think we all have a teacher, grade school perhaps, who proved that to us. They set the bar higher and you were able to do things that never occurred to you. So now let's just be crazy. What if I actually put into tools, resources? I didn't just not judge you. I didn't just say, okay, go do it. I actually provided you tools to do it, gave you researchers, whatever was necessary. The possibilities are pretty staggering as to what we could all achieve innovation-wise. So innovation, as described by the dictionary, the creation of a new device or process. It's not just stuff, it's also business models and practices, resulting from study and experimentation. It doesn't, this little light bulb dude, totally wrong. It's not an idea that just pops into your head. You try, fail, try again. Try, fail, try again. And that's what's so terrifying is you don't just fail once, you fail and you succeed, and you fail and you succeed. There are some fantastic examples throughout history of not only colossal failures, but people who had the gumption to get back on the horse and push forward again. This is the 1964 Mustang. This is not a failure. This is in response to a colossal failure. Does anyone know what the failure was? It was not the 1963 Mustang. Thank you for playing. It was the Edsel. Has everybody heard of the Edsel? They sold less than 3,000, and yet it's a vehicle that we've all heard of because it was a colossal failure. Ford was so taken aback by what a horrible failure this was that they sort of regrounded themselves and said, okay, we just got this one so wrong. And they started interviewing their ideal demographic, and a lot of the words that people used to describe their relationship with the car, what they wanted, were not based upon performance. It was speed and power and sex appeal. And so Ford designed the Mustang, which to this very day still markets itself on those same ideals. The connection to your consumer and what they actually want and how you sell that to them matters significantly. Also, being able to pick yourself up from what is perhaps one of history's worst examples of a car failure and move forward to something that has become successful for year after year after year is a fantastic example. This is a photocopier. We know them. We love them. What did this replace that was a colossal failure? Nobody remembers the Oxbox? The Oxbox was the world's first photocopier, and it was horrible on a number of levels. First of all, it had big, heavy containers of the toner that you had, and they were dusty. Who was doing office work back in the 40s? Women in pencil skirts and high heels who were trying to manipulate these massive things that they couldn't get into the machine. Also, they were very, very expensive, Xerox machines. So Xerox did two things. They replaced the hardware that was hard to operate, and they invented a brand new business model, which was they gave you the Xerox for free, charged you per copy. Very few people thought, okay, I have one, now I have two. Woohoo! That wasn't where Xerox made its mark. Xerox made its mark inventing this copy. The copy of the copy and the copy of the copy is what put them on the map. And people didn't really wrap their head around that originally until given it for free, basically. Once people figured out how much money they were spending on the individual copies, it was much cheaper to buy the original box. So that was a change in both business practice as well as the equipment itself in response to a huge failure. Filet-O-Fish, 1963, in response to a huge failure. Does anybody remember the Hula Burger? This actually looks quite good. The Hula Burger was disgusting. The Hula Burger was a regular, you had your pickles, your cheese, your secret sauce on a sesame seed bun, and a grilled piece of pineapple in the middle there. On Fridays, McDonald's had no business. Why did McDonald's have no business on Fridays? Correct. Christians would not eat fish on Fridays. And if you were a group of 5 people, perhaps, and just one was a Christian, the entire group would go somewhere else in deference to that one person. So in 1963, sort of hula tiki was a huge craze in America, and Ray Kroc decided, well, let's capitalize on that huge, crazy Hawaiian theme, and we'll make wacky hula burgers. Didn't solve his problem. Nobody wanted a hula burger. So he learned that you don't have to be crazy and wacky in response. You just have to figure out a simple solution and plow forward. Don't decide, okay, the hula burger didn't sell, I'm doomed, I should just close up shop on Fridays. Come back again with another option. This was first tested in 1991 on humans. It was supposed to help with chest pain. It didn't actually work much at all. There were some fascinating side effects with this medicine. About 50% of the test subjects had side effects. Who knows what this is? That is Viagra. Viagra was considered a huge failure when it was first introduced because it didn't do what was intended. However, due to research, study, and experimentation, and diligent notes on the 50% who had these side effects, they researched, it is now one of the most popular drugs in the world and has made them billions of dollars. However, if you go back to the very core of what Viagra does, child safe, please. Does anyone know what Viagra actually does? It's right. It's blood flow. It increases blood flow. There are some really interesting applications of Viagra right now with teeny little baby Viagras. Newborn babies will often suffer and maybe even die because their lungs aren't fully developed and they can't exchange oxygen between their lungs and their bloodstream. If this improves blood flow, they're having a lot of success with tiny little Viagras and newborn babies who can now suddenly transfer oxygen and can survive until their lungs get strong enough. So again, they didn't just sit on their laurels and say, woo, we got a hit here. They said, okay, let's go back to the core of what this thing does, and are there any other potential applications? So it's interesting to respond both from failure and see what other opportunities are with success. This is amazing. Look at the date on this, 1938. This was one of the wealthiest men in Europe at the time, the largest shoe manufacturer in Europe. This was a gentleman who was worried that he wasn't connected to his teams. He wanted to have a personal connection to be able to solve problems literally on the ground floor, and he built an elevator office. That right there is the button, and his office went up and down the entire factory floor. This was in 1938, and nobody has done anything really, and it's not on accident that this gentleman was one of the wealthiest men in Europe and sold most shoes for a chunk of time, because he saw the problem and with just sheer brute force fixed it. Here's some homework for you. Fearless things that you can do, and these are all terrifying. Acknowledge role models. Say thank you. You need to also be a role model. Up until about a month ago, this was a picture of Tiger Woods. You need to celebrate success by congratulating each other. This is really hard to do, in particular when someone may have gotten something you wanted, a better grade, the job, the interview that you wanted. We need to be better about congratulating each other, and you'd be surprised how quickly that comes back to serve you. Never eat lunch alone. Just like saying hello to the person next to you, never eat lunch alone. And there's a book by the same title that's excellent. I highly recommend it. This is super hard, particularly for introverts. You need to be the one who does the inviting. If somebody's not inviting you to lunch, you need to, and that is terrifying because you fear they may reject you, and then that kick in the stomach, the tribe reject. Get over that. And you also need to collaborate. I think a lot of people understand that collaboration brings in diverse points of view from around the world. However, what they forget is that it also helps distribute the workload. Napping, we are so bad at this here, particularly at CMU. You are never better at the interconnection of diverse ideas than when you sleep. Harvard doctor says so right there. If you want to be innovative, if you want to be fearless, you need to nap. And my last slide here with 18 seconds. Damn, I timed this good. This is a quote from Barbossa. He's a pirate. He's pointing out, we're good and lost now, and Elizabeth Swann says, what, we're lost? Why is this a good thing? And he says, yeah, you have to be lost to find a place that can't be found, otherwise everyone else would know where it was. If you're looking for innovation, you don't need to go behind the guy ahead of you who did something good. You need to look somewhere else. You need to be lost, you need to look in those nooks and crannies fearlessly. Thank you.